Few people even know what we're talking about. Everyone knows the Aztec, everyone knows the Inca, everyone knows the Maya. You mentioned Taino and they go, who are these people?
The name Taino itself is the generic term for the late prehistoric peoples of the Greater Antilles and the Bahamas, the Big Islands, Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica.
In terms of national identity, the people in Dominican Republic think of themselves as Indians, not as people of African ancestry.
These are the people that greeted Columbus. When Columbus arrived in the New World, there were several million Taino already here, living in the Greater Antilles.
Knowing more about the Tainos will help us understand that clash of cultures.
You have two worlds that didn't have previous knowledge of each other coming together and initially misunderstanding each other fundamentally because they are trying to fit them into the world as they understood it, when in fact this was something totally new and unprecedented.
There was a large number of indigenous population of Taino that were decimated, assimilated, or just disappeared within the first 10 to 20 years of contact with the New World.
Caves have a very special role in Taino culture. They are sort of the way that this world is physically connected to the underworld where the spirits of the dead dwell. The Tainos believed humans were created in two caves. The Taino people came from one cave, and all the non-Taino people came from another cave.
The Padre Nuestro complex of caverns is really 4 water-filled caverns and then several others that are land.
And it's one of only now 9 sites known with early stone materials.
When I look at Padre Nuestro, what I look at is its implications for the actual people in the Caribbean, which is one of the last places in the world that was inhabited. So 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, we know people came into the Caribbean. The question is, where did they come from? Probably the first wave coming into the Greater Antilles came from the mainland, probably Yucatan, by boat. Came across, inhabited Cuba, inhabited Dominican Republic, and we have evidence of that.
The Manantial de la Aleta, I think, has a special place among caves and caverns in that it has a very a direct vertical connection from a watery pool, a watery underworld, if you will, through the surface of the earth to the heavens.
And the only way you can explain these objects that date from 600 years before Columbus contact right up to the time of Columbus is that they were offered underwater and they were preserved there in an anaerobic, no oxygen, very little sunlight penetrating, and that's La Aleta. It has the largest diversity of Taino objects of organic and ceramic that we've seen anywhere else, and they were all placed there on purpose. They were all offered to the gods, the inner world.
What conception they have of a broader world beyond that, we don't know.
Christopher Columbus was not an accident. His voyage into the New World were the result of many historical processes. By 1492, the last kingdom of Granada is won by the Christians. And it is actually at that point that Christopher Columbus is able to gain the support of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand for his voyage to the New World.
What he was looking for above all was to become the founder of a good family, one that would have titles and privileges and renown down through the ages.
When we think of Columbus's first voyage, I mean, everyone knows Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. He came with the Nini, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. But not everybody knows that the first shipwreck of the Americas was the Santa Maria. And the Santa Maria ran gently up onto a sandbar reef in present-day Haiti. Well, they couldn't get the ship off the reef, so they had to make a decision.
Columbus was not able, with only the two smaller ships remaining, to bring everybody back to Spain.
They were able to actually use the materials from the now to build a fort called La Navidad.
And he left 39 men and he sailed off.
Columbus was of the idea that there was a lot of gold in that area. What he wanted to do was to have this fort over there so that they could start the trade with these people.
Everyone knew he was coming back. A little over a year later, he comes on the second voyage. He arrives at Navidad. And what's he find? Smoldering timbers. Everyone's dead.
There was a doctor with the group who said they looked like they'd been dead about 2 weeks.
Columbus was thinking about trade, but the Spaniards were thinking about colonization. They actually started to demand some things from the indigenous people, and the indigenous people just did not accept that.
Most probably it was the local Taínos who essentially finally decided they had to get rid of these people because they were too disruptive.
So he knows not to stay there. He elects to go down the coast where he had sailed a year prior in a matter of several days. It takes him 30 more days to make it 80 miles down the coastline, and he pulls into a place, a river, the Bajo Nico River that he had named, and he says, this is it. This is the settlement of Isabella.
They brought a priest, they brought some women, they brought animals, they brought everything they need for a full-fledged colonization.
The sort of backbone of the early Spanish colonial economy was the right to make demands on the labor of the Taínos.
If a Taíno did not want to accept Christianity, that person could be enslaved.
One of the major sources of the writings of Father Las Casas.
He had seen actually in Cuba rivers of blood, of all the indigenous people that were killed, a massacre in the hands of the Spaniards.
They overworked the Taínos in the gold mines and the Spanish plantations. They took them away from their villages and their families at crucial points of the agricultural year.
From then on, we're going to see that there's going to be a major clashes, actually, in which many Spaniards actually died at the hands of the Taínos.
The trigger, at least as the story has come down to us, was when a Spaniard cut off a Taíno's ear on a trumped-up charge of theft.
The Spanish show up with hackbutt rifles, crossbows, horses with soldiers with lances.
But I would say that the most important weapon against the indigenous people was actually disease.
There are accounts of at least some Taínos killing their children and then committing suicide rather than trying to face a world in which they could no longer cope.
The annihilation of the culture of the Taíno and right in through the Americas is well documented. As small amounts of Spanish made huge influence because of their arms and their weapons and their tactics. They were there to conquer.
forget it. The only Jesus I know is him, and the one thing he don't need is a partner.
Mama, how do we know Jesus wasn't black? He could have been from the lost tribe of Israel. They were supposed to be black.
I bet they were. If ever people were lost, we're it.
Now just hush up, both of you. This picture has been in my family for as long as I can remember. When I was a baby, I don't know what I saw first. My mama, my papa, or this Jesus. Now, he's the one I know and love, so let's close the subject. Jesus was black, the Bible would have said so.
But it does say so.
What are you talking about?
I read about it. It's in Revelations chapter 1, verse 14. I read about it in Muhammad Speaks. It says, his hair is like wool, and his eyes are like flame of fire.
Well, Lord have mercy. It sure do say that, don't it?
And see, Mama, look at that hair, like wool, ain't it? And look at them eyes, red like fire.
Yeah, they sure is. Julie, how come you decided to paint this?
I don't know. All of a sudden, I just had divine thoughts on my mind.
And for JJ, that's a first.
What, having divine thoughts?
No, having a mind.
I guess I ought to be grateful for JJ having Jesus on his mind in any color.
Then we can hang him on the wall, Mama?
Well, now,
Please, Mama.
All right. But just for Black History Week. After that, he comes down.
of 606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet. 606. It's made up of stades, exactly the same. Now, if that's not interesting enough, look at the angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza. If you take the angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza, the slope is 51.8 degrees. Let's go back to the earthworks. If you measure the line that goes straight through the center of the structure, right here, and then you go true north, it's 51.8 degrees. That angle is exactly the same angle as the pyramids of Giza. It is the same math, the same calculations as ancient Egyptians. Let me show you one more connection. In 1860, David Wyrick, he's a guy who surveyed the Newark earthworks. He was digging into a mound near those earthworks and he found a wooden coffin made of oak. They opened up the coffin and found a skeleton of a man holding a little box that was about 8.10 inches in size. The box had been cemented shut here. This, by the way, is sitting in Ohio. Well, he opened up the box and he found a little man inside, a little black stone. They took it to scholars and they looked at it. The man seems to be carrying something, and there's writing here at first they couldn't recognize. The writing is, they thought in 1860, some sort of Hebrew. Well, finally, about 20 years later, they found some rabbis living in the area, and the rabbis looked at that, and they could read it. They said it was an old kind of block Hebrew, and it was a rendition of the Ten Commandments. Now, this is another piece. Block Hebrew, they said they'd never seen anything like it. Mainstream archaeologists at the time called this a hoax. But then in 1900, or just about after 1900, in Israel, they found the same block-style Hebrew writing. Mainstream archaeologists still dismissed the findings. They found it in Israel and they found it in Ohio. But there was another stone that they found that they couldn't argue. This is the Bat Creek stone. It was found during the course of an official Smithsonian evacuation. The Smithsonian didn't understand the meaning of the writing on the stone. They thought it was Cherokee, since it came from Cherokee country. They didn't realize that it's actually Hebrew. They had published this originally upside down.